Now that we've set up our file, we need to configure and set up the actual laser cutter itself. The laser cutter adjusts the focal distance between the workpiece and the laser beam to allow for the beam to focus at the correct height by adjusting the height of the workpiece itself. Therefore, we need to input the thickness of the workpiece into our software. In this particular example, we have plywood that is approximately 1/8 of an inch thick, but we need to measure an exact thickness. To do that, we use our caliper tool, which is provided with the lasers. The calipers provided with the laser have an on and off switch, a zero switch, and a units switch. The unit switch allows you to switch from metric units to fractional inches to decimal inches just by pressing the button. And in the event that when you close the calipers completely, it does not read exactly 0, you can calibrate it by pressing the 0 button. Calipers will measure the exact thickness of the piece of material you wish to measure by closing the jaws as shown here. When using the calipers, the space between the inside of the large jaws will match the space between the outside of the small jaws and the depth of the probe. So any of these three tools can be used to measure the thickness you need depending on the exact properties of your workpiece. The calipers indicate that the exact thickness of the wood is approximately 0.13 inches, so I'll note that for reference here on the next step. I can then place the wood that I intend to cut into the cutting surface of the laser, which is anywhere within the area of this hexagonal cutting grid. Now that we've set up our workpiece in the laser cutter, we can now send the file from CorelDRAW into the Universal Control Panel software, which actually operates the laser itself. We select the File drop-down, click Print. This brings up the printer menu. We need to confirm that the printer that's selected is VLS 2.3, and then click Print. After we've clicked the Print button, we can open the UCP program on the computer by clicking the shortcut on the desktop. That'll bring up the UCP Viewer control panel. This control panel has the controls for the entire laser system, and as you can see, it also has our workpiece that just came over from CorelDRAW. On the right-hand side of the UCP control panel, there are a number of buttons, some of which duplicate the functions on the control panel of the laser itself. We have our large start and stop button, a power button, pause. These three buttons replicate the same buttons as found on the face of the laser. There's an up and down button that allows to raise and lower the engraving table. And then there's also up, down, right, and left buttons, which allow us to move the laser carriage around above the workpiece if we needed to do that for some reason. There is a home button that allows us to home the laser carriage vertically and horizontally. In ordinary use on startup, the laser will home itself both vertically and in the XY, but if we need to do this manually, we can select these buttons. Below these are 5 additional options. We have a zoom button. The zoom tool allows us to zoom in and inspect our workpiece. Always note the scale on the X and Y axes on the left and top of your workpiece. This will show you whether or not you're zoomed in. The mouse wheel will allow you to also adjust your zoom. Whenever you're visualizing the size of your finished product, it's important to check to make sure that you do show 0 on the X and the Y axis to make sure that you are at the fully zoomed view. The workspace that's represented by the white rectangle is the maximum workspace within the laser system, so it's 16 inches wide and 12 inches high. In our particular case, I do have a smaller piece of wood installed in the laser that is not represented here because the laser system is not able to detect that wood. I just need to know that as the user. Additional options on the right-hand side include the focus view tool. It allows us to move the laser head over our workpiece. Because I need to confirm that my workpiece fits in the laser and to confirm that the design that I've laid out is properly located on my workpiece the way I want it to, I can use the laser pointer, which is a red dot that does not cut on the laser cutter head, to confirm that the points indicated on my workpiece are the same points that I'm expecting in the software. By clicking focus view, the laser head will move that pointer to indicate the selected points on my art. Whenever I'm cutting several pieces out of one piece of wood, I like to check to make sure that I have everything located correctly so that my cuts don't accidentally overlap using the focus view tool. Next to the focus view tool is the relocate tool. If, for example, I learned that my art is not located where I want it to be on my workpiece, I can move it by selecting the relocate tool. This allows me to select and reposition my art around the workpiece in the universal control panel. If I wish to make copies or duplicates, I can use the duplicate view tool to make additional versions, either in lines along the X or Y axis, and I can adjust the spacing between those. The final tool, the estimate view, will allow me to estimate the total time for the job to be completed. In this particular case, I can click Start, and the laser will give me a happy little noise and estimate that it will take approximately 1 minute and 20 seconds to perform the process that I've designed, which involved rastering the hello and then cutting out a square around it. This is especially important so that you know in advance if you might need to take a break before you start your laser cutting process, or if there'll be enough time before the next user arrives for you to finish your job. Now that we are ready to set up the detailed settings for a particular processing job, we click the Settings button, which is in the lower right-hand corner. This brings up the Laser Settings control panel. The Laser Settings control panel in the upper right-hand portion has a Materials menu with a variety of material settings preloaded into the software based on the materials that you're intending to use. In my particular case, I'm cutting on Baltic birch plywood. I know that plywood, because it's wood, is a natural material. And then I can search down. I find a drop-down menu for wood. Underneath the wood, there's a medium density wood, because Baltic birch is a medium density product. It's not super hard like oak, but it's also not very soft like pine wood. Turns out there is a pre-generated option for birch wood. So I can select birch. This will bring up a field with detailed setup options. I hit close without changing any of those. Next, I go to the lower left-hand corner of the laser settings control panel and adjust my material thickness. In the lower right-hand corner, I confirm that I'm using inches for my units, and then I adjust my thickness to the 0.13 that I measured on the calipers earlier. Based upon this thickness setting and the wood selection in the previous menu, the software will now automatically make determinations about how intense to set the laser and its laser travel speed and some other settings to give me optimum performance based on the default settings. In the upper right-hand corner, there is a menu that allows you to make intensity adjustments which vary from the previously programmed default settings. depending on the properties of your exact material, including its moisture content, its exact density, and some other factors, you may need to adjust the intensity by up to 10 to 15%. If you find that you have to increase the intensity setting beyond plus 15%, it's very unlikely that you have your other materials configured correctly, and you are increasing the risk of charring and burning whenever you make those adjustments. With raster adjustments, on some materials, you will find that the engraving color will darken or lighten depending on the intensity that you choose. On other materials, you'll actually find no change whatsoever by adjusting intensity. For example, when you're engraving on glass, it's either engraved or it's not. Whereas on wood, an increased intensity may cause a darker or a more caramelized color in the finished product. Once I've made all of my selections, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a button that says Apply. It's important that you select Apply. Otherwise, if you simply click OK without selecting Apply, the system will use the previous settings, whatever they were before you came in and made your changes. So click Apply, then you can click OK. That will save your settings. And now we're ready to start the job. Now that the machine is set up, we can go back to the laser cutter and perform one or two last steps before cutting our work. The system allows us to preview the position of the laser cutter head if we press the Start button while the laser cover is open. The red laser pointer will move back and forth over your work during this preview in exactly the same locations that the engraving or cutting head will move. So this will allow you to confirm that you're using the correct settings in terms of the location on your workpiece as one last check before you actually start cutting your work. To begin the cutting process itself, I will close the laser cutter cover. I will turn on the air filter, making sure the air filter is always operating whenever the laser cutter is on, and then I will press Start. Once my cutting process is complete, I can shut off the air filter, open the cover, and remove my finished workpiece.